created to address the lack of diversity in clinical trials. That's the root problem that we're trying to solve. Research that has been done years and years are 95% European white male, 95% European white male. Unfortunately, that's not good enough for us to have effective drug products, especially when treating a large continent like Africa. So what we're trying to do is identify individuals that are not being represented in the traditional drug trials in order to build better drug targets and drug discovery. We've seen tremendous traction over the last month and a half, including bringing on key advisors both in the U.S. and in Africa, of well-renowned scientists and government officials that has embraced the business model. Over the last 2 years, COVID has been able to expose a lot of the health disparities that were already prevalent throughout the drug trials and clinical research across the globe. What COVID has been able to do is stop the entire world. It's the first time in my life that a pandemic was not only in Africa or in the Caribbean or in Latin America. This was the entire world that was affected by COVID. A lot of the patients that were suffering from a lot of the major illnesses and dying were African American, minorities, and Latin diaspora folks. And so, what that then did was highlight health disparity that underlies some of the disease area that affects Black and brown people, which is why Indigenous felt so strongly about making this a global company. And so Indigenous was created by Howard alumni. 40 to 50% of the individuals that are key stakeholders in Indigenous are Howard alumni, both geneticists, PhD in biochemistry, medical doctors that went to Howard universities, and also undergrad. And so I'm proud to say that Indigenous reflects the true leadership and Black excellence of Howard University. So Indigenous really creates that global view of what pharmaceutical and drug discovery should look like in the next 10 to 20 years.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Health Discovery for the Culture. Here live today at CIC in Philadelphia. My name is Chris Frew. I'm the CEO of BioBuzz Media, and we're super excited to be here today to help host this event with this amazing group of innovators we have here at the table. For those of you who don't know BioBuzz Media, we started about 11 years ago with a singular mission. We wanted to build a more connected biotech ecosystem. So 11 years later, we're still hard at that mission, and we do that through events like this one here today, telling media and telling stories about these great innovators and the companies that are advancing our field, and also helping to connect the workforce of the future to today's employers. So we're here today in the city of brotherly love, talking about health discovery and culture, and I think one of the themes that I've thought about as I've gotten to know our panelists and thought about this event is really convergence. And convergence is when two disparate things come together and join together. They often create an upswelling or an evolution of something new. And I think that speaks a lot about this partnership between LucasPye BIO and IndyGeneUS AI that we're here to talk about today. Not only the convergence of the innovators and the different paths that these folks have taken to get here today, the two companies and their different technologies that came together, but the convergence of science and technology and what that looks like in today's biotech ecosystem. And when you look at their companies, as we talk about it today, you're going to really see that. The other convergence that has been part of the theme of this three-day event is also the convergence of science and culture. And we're going to talk a lot more about that tomorrow's event, but that's also an underlining theme that I think it's important that is discussed and brought to attention. So here in Philadelphia, the city is no stranger to discovery and collaboration and innovation. I think most people know Philadelphia from, or a lot of people do, from the birthplace of kind of the American ideals of liberty and freedom. But there's a lot of other firsts. The city was where the first computer was invented back in 1946 at UPenn, the ENIAC computer. The city was also home to the first hospital in America, official hospital, started by Ben Franklin, actually. CHOP, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, was the first children's only pediatric hospital. UPenn actually was the first official medical school in the country. Recently, the city is experiencing this kind of biotech boom, which I'm sure Tia experiences firsthand every day. And that boom is really because the city's has been home to the first FDA-approved cell and gene therapies, which is, again, creating this amazing upsurge in the local region. So there's a lot of firsts in this city. And though we're sitting here today on the foundation of great history and great discovery, what I'm really excited about is the firsts that are going to come, that are going to be brought about by people here at this table and this partnership that's emerging. So before we jump into the companies and their technology, I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves. So Tia, CEO of LucasPye BIO, why don't we start with you, and then we'll jump to Yusuf, founder and CEO of IndyGeneUS AI.
Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us today. My name is Tia Lyles-Williams, founder and CEO of LucasPye BIO, 20 years experience, Howard University alumni, USC alumni, Full Sail University alumni.
Hello, good morning. Yusuf Henriques, founder and CEO of IndyGeneUS AI, Howard alumni as well. Prior military, combat medic in the military. IndyGeneUS really was started to definitely address the lack of diversity in clinical trials. And so, our team here today of diverse scientists are here to change the way drug discovery is made.
Good morning, Dr. Bradford Wilson, geneticist by training, also Howard University alumni, co-founder and chief scientific officer of IndyGeneUS AI.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back in the city of brotherly love. I'm a proud alumnus of Wharton and COO and co-founder of IndyGeneUS AI, where I help build out the operations in Africa across the globe.
Oh, I'm good. Fantastic. So all great things have a great story at the beginning. So before we, again, jump in to your companies, Tia and Yusuf, can you tell us how this partnership was sparked? What's the founding story behind this partnership?
You keep picking up this mic. I want to make sure. How we started, we recently reconnected through an event at Launch Bio. It was an event concerning diversity in the workplace, particularly life sciences. And that was, I guess, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Prior to that, we haven't seen each other since 2005. So we're both members or alumni of Howard University, same graduating class. And we initially met through our genetics course and our genetics study group.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because, you get caught up after we got out of college. As she mentioned, 2005. And so spent a lot of nights studying genetics and seeing Tia around, because we all were in biology, chemistry class down in the valley. But running around, and I was introduced to this panel, not even realize that she had been somebody that I graduated with, because I had previously been in the military. So I did my degree in 3 years. I got to Howard 2002, so I wasn't really part of the graduating class of 2005. But I made my way there anyway by taking classes in the summer. So Tia was one of the people that stood out, and so it was a surreal moment when we finally realized that we were sent. Literally during the panel, I'm looking in Zoom, I'm looking at my computer and pulled her up on LinkedIn and saw that she went to school from 01 to 05. I was like, I graduated in 05. And then we had that haha moment that, we had been gone from each other, but seemed to be in the same space. And it may have been just having that genetics connection, being in that class. And here we are looking at genes and gene therapy and how to to develop drug products for diverse population.
That's great. It's almost like the universe was ready. Timing was right to bring you back together.
Yeah, it's very, what do you call it? Serendipitous.
Yeah, very serendipitous. Well, so that's great. And Dr. Brad and Wilmot, so you both had known Yusuf before, right? Before Indigenous AI? Or Brad, you have, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Prior to founding of Indigenous, I joined Yusuf on a previous effort with a company called True Genomics Health that went through the Illumina Accelerator out in Foster City, California. It's about 4 years ago now, actually. And that was a great experience. It was out in Silicon Valley for about 6 months, where we developed an assay for predisposition to PTSD, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and depression, a next generation sequencing-based assay.
Yeah, that's great. So you caught the bug, and you guys haven't been able to leave each other's side since, huh?
Our good teammates are hard to find.
It's true. It's true. Dr. Allen, how about you? How did you connect with the company?
Well, it was the 21st century COVID and post-COVID way of doing things online.
All right.
So we met virtually, actually, but we have a friend in common who's an entrepreneur in DC who actually referred me to him after he had reached out to me through LinkedIn. I think the path had been, I had been a management consultant with Africa CDC, and obviously you can see the connection between the work of Indigenous and Africa CDC in Africa, had some other touch points in pharma in Africa, in the US. And so it proved to be, a great connection. And this is where we are now. But again, we came together as a virtual company, but we're moving forward. Yeah. And I also met Brad virtually as well. So
that's great.
And so this is the first time, I don't know if I should say this, but this is the first time we're meeting in person. So between myself and the CEO, CSO, and our head of media and communication. So,
but doesn't that speak to what the potential is today, with technology and again, LinkedIn's like the modern day dating app, right? For businesses,
it's Instagram for adults.
Right. Instagram for adults. Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
So it was interesting because I was looking when I decided to start Indigenous. It was through a hackathon I did with MIT. So they called me to do an MIT hackathon to hack racism. I was like, oh, okay, this will be fun. And so I really felt the passion, looking at the lack of diversity and the health disparities that COVID kind of highlighted, but then also brought a team together virtually using Zoom. And then I'm quite experienced on LinkedIn, being that I've been doing it for about 4 or 5 years. So I started doing search on people that had backgrounds in Africa, that had worked with the CDC. And then so as soon as I kept putting in those filters, Wilmot and like 2 other people popped up. And I was like, well, this is the 3 people I'm going to interview, right? And so after speaking with him through Zoom, time difference, 6-hour time difference, we were able to kind of come, not having a genomics background, I had to sell him on the idea a couple of times. But no, I think it ended up being a good partnership, and I'm glad we're finally got to meet on this side of the pond.
That's great. So why don't you keep the mic for a second, and then I want to talk to Tia about LucasPye BIO's founding story. But can you elaborate on that? Like, tell us the founding story for Indigenous AI, and kind of what's the big problem that you all are solving here today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As I mentioned, I think COVID kind of highlighted what we already knew for a long time. One, that the health disparity affect minorities, Black and brown folks, and even women, because they're not included in the drug trials. And so my background, I worked at FDA early part of my career. So these were things that I knew for the last 15 years after graduating Howard in 2005, starting the agency, the FDA, in 2006. So I've seen the data for most of these pharmaceutical drug products, and they lack diversity in minorities and women in the trials. And so I think COVID then highlighted that we were all at home seeing how it played out with the COVID-19 pandemic. And so when I started looking at doing this hackathon, MIT reached out and we were doing hacking COVID, figuring out ways to do masks, turning CPAP machine. Because of my FDA background, NYU called and asked if I could help them convert CPAP machines into ventilators. So, these were all during the pandemic. So while most people were trying to figure the things out, I was quite busy, trying to help, figure out ways, working with different task force to try to figure ways how to get people protected. And so the Veteran Future Lab in New York, where I was a part of, we galvanized and kind of helped, with the dire situation that was going on in New York, where it really was prevalent of how, it affected different ethnic backgrounds, the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, yeah, that drove me to do the MIT Hacking Racism Challenge. It ended up seeding like 21 different solutions. But the one main thing I did a track called Lack of Diversity in Clinical Trials. And so the three companies, the three ideas that won, they all had good ideas. But then I started realizing that this is not just health disparities specific to the US, this is also global. So, that ended up being the reason why Indigenous was created, was to address a global issue, because that's what COVID-19 did. It showed that a pandemic could slow down the entire world. And so Indigenous was formed out of that inception of the hackathon. And then again, I had to go out and recruit individuals. I knew Brad was going to say yes anyway, regardless of where he was. But again, also recruiting knowing your strength and your weakness. Yeah. Again, I have the ability to bring folks together, and know I needed a strong person, economics and business operation background. And so I had to do that virtually. But yeah, that's the inception of Indigenous. We see this as a global issue now. I think that's what COVID also showed, that, you got to start thinking about solution globally.
Yeah, we all see that firsthand. And I think this partnership is another example of kind of that, finding your complement, right? So Tia, you have a different path, still quite storied with a lot of accomplishments, but a different side of the industry.
Different side of the industry.
So yeah, tell us about your founding story and kind of how you came to LucasPye BIO and why you started it.
So I'm on the other side. I'm surprised I never met this guy at any of the biotech companies I worked with. But I've been in the actual manufacturing of biologic drugs and developing those processes for the past 20 years. So my background started at Howard. And before I graduated, I already had a job at Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in Silver Spring, Maryland, the naval base, and done a lot of benchtop research there. And then from there, I went corporate and started working at Human Genome Sciences in Rockville, Maryland. That's now GSK. I worked there for a few years. I actually have a chronic condition myself, so I took some time off, and then I restarted my career at Amgen and at Baxter in Thousand Oaks, California. And then my first CDMO was at Abbott, and then most recent Lonza, and then on to Jazz Pharmaceuticals, lastly here in Philadelphia. So my path has been, once the research and discovery is done, or in this case, once they've identified the therapeutic that they want to start pushing towards the commercial market, and that's when my company come in and we develop an actual manufacturing process for it, actually manufacture it for human clinical trials in the commercial market once approved by FDA or any other regulatory agency.
So really the other side of the coin to get Indigenous AI out there.
Exactly. So that I do the part that actually gets the drug out to the patients that need them. And so the purpose of our company being started was also on a diversity stuff. Being in the manufacturing role, we do interact with the human clinical trial sites. And so I noticed that certain drugs that I was involved in making at these different companies, things that target people of color, such as lupus, sickle cell, any other of those diseases, heart disease, whatever, we weren't being included in these clinical trials. And so oftentimes is, the old saying where, it's whatever we can get through the commercial market a lot faster, whatever we can recruit a lot faster. But I think we've seen with COVID, the real effects of that, of not including people of color, making sure that your study is diverse enough so that you can see a little bit what's going on and effects of each person. in the U.S. or around the globe. The other part was the cost of drugs. So if anybody knows about LucasPye BIO, our goal is to always be located in the underserved community and provide jobs to people in underserved communities. And so our goal with that is kind of like a trickle down effect. If we can do our manufacturing operation in a fiscal manner, then the sponsors of those companies that we serve will be able to trickle down that savings to patients so they can be able to afford the medication.
I think that's awesome. And you're doing that through a couple of different ways too. So you're also the first biotech company that's, am I saying this right, fully digitized your processes?
Yes, fully digitized as far as our quality management system and to the extent of our supply chain management system. We're also the only large-scale CGMP CDMO in the state of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So we talked about the impact on lack of diversity in clinical trials. Brad, maybe you could talk to that a little bit. Like, how does the genomics work you all are doing and building out, how does that impact the future of medicine and how will that change things?
Sure. So essentially what we are moving into now in terms of clinical medicine is the implementation or the consideration of genetic factors in terms of how individuals are treated. And the issue is that if diverse populations aren't represented in the research that's conducted, then variation or genetic variants in those populations that are important regarding whatever disease you want to investigate or research, then there will be information that's left out. You'll miss information. And where you have populations that are more genetically diverse, if those populations are represented in studies, then the factors, the drivers of disease in those populations won't be identified. And then subsequently, you can't develop diagnostics and subsequently to that, therapeutics to target those.
So that's like the more personalized medicine for broader communities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also in addition to that, in terms of the science itself, where we look at the genome, the map that we're working with, one would argue that the map is incomplete because of the lack of representation of these populations. So for just a quick example, there was a small study done with a small population in the country of Uganda, where over 3 million previously unidentified or uncharacterized variants were identified in just a small population. So if you extrapolate that to countless numbers of tribes in the 54 countries across the continent, there's a whole vast world of information that has yet to be tapped into, that's yet to be understood and factored in to, moving forward as we move forward, as you mentioned, with gene therapies, right? So if you don't identify the genetic factors that are driving these conditions in these populations, how can you ever develop a gene therapy to address them?
That's fascinating. So, Wilmot, what is the impact on, because the company focuses on indigenous and African diaspora, right? So that's your focus for the clinical data or the genomic data you're doing. What's the impact that the companies can make in Africa?
Sure.
And how have you been building that so far?
Yes, thanks. That's a great question. I think that it's important to understand there are a couple narratives that are juxtaposed. In the American context, it's diversity around gender and race, but in Africa, it's because of economic geography, right? There's a huge gap in terms of access to care, healthcare resources, in terms of scientific research, and then the sovereignty that each country has in owning and keeping within the country that DNA samples, the DNA data. And so I think we will address and are addressing all of those things. And it's really, really exciting. It's important to point out that there is talent, capacity on the continent, but there's also a tremendous gap between Africa and the rest of the world. And that's where we come in to supplement and enhance that. And so very, very specifically, my colleagues would tell you, I was late for dinner last night because I was trying to get a COVID-19 vaccine. CVS walk in, I couldn't get one, but that was just a minor inconvenience of hours. Yeah. In Africa, I've been waiting for months. Mm-hmm. And we still know that so very few people on the continent have been vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So if you bring the power of genomics to enhance vaccine production, to drive that, drug delivery, acute care for patients who, if they're wealthy and fortunate, can fly to London or to India. This is a game changer. Mm-hmm. And so this is all bigger than all of us. That's the message we also want investors to hear as well. But it's bigger than all of us. It's important not only for people of African descent, but for all of humanity. When Africa is stronger from a health perspective, the world is stronger. Why is that the case? Because one, the richness of, I think, the value proposition of the vision that Yusuf delivered to us and that we're trying to help him implement is that you look at the genetic diversity of Africa, it's the strongest across the world. But it also means something else. It's a double-edged sword in the sense that you have more variance now in that 1.3 billion population anywhere else, coming from India, coming from South Africa. And so with the power of genomics, the power of whole genome sequencing, we can get a handle on that and do a lot better job of helping more people live longer and safer. Yes, not only with infectious disease and global pandemics, but with malaria, tuberculosis, all these things. And secondarily, and as importantly, training the next generation of geneticists, genomicists, those who have life science training with genomics, as Dr. Brad mentioned, so that samples don't have to be shipped out, so that there are more resources and that one day there's a pharmacy in Kenya called Good Life. So one day, Good Life, I'll be able to walk, or when the next pandemic comes, someone will be able to walk inside Good Life and get vaccinated and not have to fly out of the continent. Or someone from the village will be able to have those vaccines delivered there, and who won't have the opportunity as I do, as a privileged person, to fly back to Washington, D.C., to Philadelphia to have these things done. So it's a game changer.
Yeah. If I can stick with you, or anyone can answer this, but as you're talking, I'm thinking, how important is that ground game there in Africa to get more samples, to educate? And just through the process, I can imagine you're going to inspire people too when they can understand what's now possible through, I don't know how you collect, is it swab or however else, but like how important is that ground game that you're working on?
I'll speak to the operational part. Maybe Brad or Yusuf can speak to science. So what we've done so far, you asked me this before, sorry, I didn't answer part two of the question. We've been able through partnerships to access about 20,000 DNA samples. Also sequencing capacity. The epicenter for whole genome sequencing is in Nigeria right now, but with 1.3 billion people, that's really not enough for the entire continent. In East Africa, there's some sequencing capacity, but we're hoping to enhance that and accelerate that. So we have a presence in Kenya, have partnerships that are in final discussions in other regions of East Africa. We're not going to give you the entire playbook, but but in other regions of Africa, we're really, I think, focus on expanding and understanding the power of partnerships. Yeah. But most importantly, bringing the best of technology to bear, whether that's blockchain encryption, whether that's tokenization for people who actually contribute their DNA samples, who are finally being compensated each time it's being used, to health records and mobile health, and integrating clinical data, genomic data with demographic data across the continent.
Yeah, and just to echo, everything Dr. Allen said, diversity is the key. And so that's really what we're trying to drive, is to enhance the availability of more diverse genomic samples, so that we could find these needle in a haystack and bring better drug discovery. And as Brad say, gene therapy, working now with our partner, that will be a long-term relationship in getting these things from end to end. As you know, the cycle of getting the drug to market is quite lengthy. And so what you hear here is the innovation along next-gen sequencing with the automated process and digitized process, that we've cut out some of that long cycle of getting a drug to market once you've been able to identify different areas that could be useful to the global population. And so, yeah, one of the things that we've been really doing is making sure that, we're looking at this from a global standpoint. So as Wilmot said, Afro-Caribbean, Latin communities, here in the U.S., we're trying to make sure that, we're creating the most diverse data set that has really not been achieved even here in the U.S. yet, by including clinical and genomic data. And I know Brad will speak to that, because that's where the power of insights will come from, and be able to start this new, innovation going forward. And so, that's the main thing we looked at. And then the second piece you just mentioned, Kenya was very interesting to me when I did my research, because they were identified as one of the most innovative parts of the continent, along with the fact that one of the most diverse part of the continent. East Africa is the most diverse. So there were a couple of reasons why that was our landing zone on the continent. For a lot of people that ask why Kenya versus somewhere else, is because of those two factors. But we really feel, like you said, there's some countries that in Africa that have embraced the fact of increasing more innovation in healthcare, and are actually doing something by building infrastructure. And what we want to do, as Wilmot said, is to add to capacity. They'll be able to, again, one day not have, 1.2 billion people with only 1% that has been given the vaccine, and the vaccine's been out over months.
Hold on one second. I got you, Dr. Bird. But I just want to make sure y'all understand what this connection means. So the thing that happened with Tuskegee Airmen, the thing that happened with Henrietta Lacks, this kind of rights that wrong and provides some transparency, so that when you do give up your clinical information with what they're setting up, the individuals will actually be compensated every time that information is looked up and used in research. This is still what is not happening today in the U.S. with Henrietta Lacks and her family. They do not receive a dime. Despite the life science industry making a so-called pledge never to use these cells, they are still using these cells today. So I just want to make sure that y'all understand the historical factor with saying that we're going to make genomic research or clinical research or human clinical trials a lot more equitable, so that actually know who's using your information, when they're using your information, how they're using your information, and ultimately being able to get into a point where they can compensate you for that up front. So I just want to make that connection. Hold on.
Yeah, that's. I think that's a incredible connection too. And I'd like at some point someone to maybe after you talk about really the impact that the technology and blockchain has on delivering that solution, because I think that's a fascinating thing that I'm sure a lot of people have questions about. So,
yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what Yusuf was mentioning earlier in terms of these disparities being global, and that same health disparities that African Americans are facing here in the States, we know that populations on the continent are facing those very same disparities with regards to many chronic diseases, in addition to the heavy load of infectious diseases that populations on the continent are impacted by. So what looking across the diaspora allows us to do is it's a more powerful, more robust way to approach research on these conditions, because you have different populations that are in different environmental contexts, right? But then ultimately have the same phenotype or the same condition that they're dealing with. And then you can look across the genetics of all these populations. And then so you can kind of tease out, it's a more robust way and a more powerful way to tease out this information with regards to what the genetic drivers are of these diseases. And in addition to that, when you can bring in multiple individuals, say for example, in a family where you have multiple individuals in that family impacted by or affected by a condition, and then individuals in the family who are not, that's an even more powerful tool in terms of understanding the genetic drivers and causes of disease.
Yeah, that's great.
So yeah, so just to touch on, because I've been in healthcare the last 25 years, I've seen, from end to end some of the areas that needed some innovation, and so indigenous, embodies that, and with the addition of what LucasPye BIO brings, we now have an end-to-end, a true end-to-end solution. I thought I had an end-to-end solution with the team that I put together, but to touch on what you talked about. Safety and privacy is a big thing in the communities that we're trying to serve. So one of the things, that I had to make sure that I drove home was that this would be a secure database and repository. So I went out and, made sure that, on the front end, we were looking at one point of care. You also have to think about it. We just spent a year and change from our living rooms doing telehealth, right? And so, what I wanted to do was make sure that we also were thinking about bringing that level of technology to the patient where they are. So point of care was important. So I went out and sought a digital mobile health platform, Afia Record, which is our partner, who had been doing communication through Kenya of notifying folks about the pandemic. And so they've amassed a large, on their app, they've amassed about 140,000 patients. That could potentially be patients we were able to recruit from. But to your point around the encryption, we wanted to make sure that we had, a way in order to do, contracts. So having that encryption blockchain gives us two things: a mechanism how to compensate individuals through their mobile technology, but also keeping the data secure and private, where we're not selling the data, right? One of the big things about indigenous value is that we're not going to be selling the data to pharma company. We'll give them the ability to data mine, query, and answer these hard questions, but still keeping the privacy and the security of the patient and their identity secured. And so that's what blockchain is able to provide us. And I have a good partner there because I helped them with some of the beta testing. Encryption is the name of the company. David Kopsel, ethics lawyer by training. So felt we were in good hands, and he's been in business for over 10 years and is actually already on the marketplace. So we felt that that was a true partnership that we could help address these countries with the issues of, the biggest thing we've been getting questions around is the privacy of the data and where will that data be stored. And so we've made that commitment to have it reside on the continent and never leave the continent. That's
great. So one of the things that I'm also hearing is that blockchain and encryption technology, you talk about safety and privacy, but what you're really establishing with the community is trust, right? And building on your comments about Henrietta Leaks and Tuskegee Airmen. So you're solving a trust issue as you're developing this company as well.
On both sides, on the patient side and on the supply side. So our proprietary apps have the same similar technology with blockchain. And so the whole purpose of our proprietary apps is to help us be more transparent with the customers of a CDMO so they can see how their product is being manufactured. They can be clued in on where it's at any point in the manufacturing process. If something goes wrong with one of our vendors, which Yusuf would tell you better than I, that even though I'm not the one that make every piece of equipment that we use in the process, I'm still responsible. So to give you an example of that is with Emergent Biosolutions and the situation that happened with Johnson & Johnson. That's a situation of cross-contamination. We're using the wrong or the incorrect raw materials. All this stuff, blockchain technology can be used on both ends to prevent that.
Yeah, and to loop that, what you just mentioned, the trust. As you know, in minority community, that goes a long way. And when I thought about building indigenous, that was one of the major themes that came out of the hackathon. It was, how do we build trust with a community that has, again, had some bad run-ins with clinical trials, right? As we just heard a few of those. And so that was the springboard of making sure that, the things that we're doing, we talk transparency, explaining what this is. It's a new technology. These are all things, education, training. These are all components that are part of the, the bedrock and woven into indigenous, because we look like the people that have concerns about, your DNA, your genetic material being passed around because of examples that was been shown here. So to your point, that's a key fundamental fact of what indigenous is driving in order to make sure that, we're building relationship with the communities both here and in Africa, because that's going to be a primary thing in order to get more people engaged and involved in these trials so that we could advance medicine the way it should be.
Yeah. Dr. Allen, how important is that element to the company, that using technology to build trust, and what's the response you're seeing, from the engagement you're having?
Well, technology adoption is really going very, very fast. In Africa, most of the money in terms of technology is going into fintech, financial technology. Health tech, ed tech, and other applications of technology are growing and expanding. But what we're doing now, I think, is not only impacting health tech from a traditional sense, but having the multiplier effect of integrating genomics into drug manufacturing, right? That is really, really important what we're doing. And when you not only can come in and sequence data that is owned by members of countries and citizens, but also in turn say, hey, we're integrating that into indigenous owned or co-owned pharmaceutical manufacturing so that drug discovery, drug development can happen in your country. That enhances this trust. So it's just that's also part of our model. And there is this, trust that frankly has to be developed between the diaspora and Africa that no one really talks about because there historically are, there's misinformation. There have been attitudes and mindsets that have been adopted that are not true to reality, most of which have been mediated through media. So we're also doing that. And so it's important to know, for example, you see the four of us, but standing with us are advisors and partners who are Africans who are on the continent who say, we believe in this. We understand that this Africa diaspora connection is really, really important, such as Dr. Elizabeth Walla, who is a pediatrician there. And we also have other partners. And the great news is that this sort of support between Africa and the diaspora is now being globally recognized. We've had some good traction with customers, but also other board members such as Professor Steve Salmon here at Wharton, who've joined with us, and other people and other stakeholders who have supported our mission, consultants and advisors. So we're really grateful for that trust building collaboration when you see that the trust building collaboration, for example, in the US in the wake of George Floyd really resulted in push and advanced change. We think the same will happen when we have multi-coalition stakeholder groups, private sector, public-private partnership, advancing healthcare around this theme of health equity, precision equity, and we're seeing that take place now.
Yeah, more businesses had a deep understanding of trust, as you all do, that I bet we'd see a lot of things move a lot faster. So as we continue here, I want to make sure everyone also really truly understands the future impact of, you've talked about this end-to-end solution, right? And we've talked a lot about, the genetics end and the impact of a more diverse, genetics on the research and medicine. But one of the promises of gene therapy is, again, that lower cost of medicine, delivering personalized medicine to smaller populations of people. And the efficiencies, Tia, you talked about, is lowering cost of that, driving that cost down. So I guess maybe, I guess between Tia and Dr. Wilson, can you really illustrate that, like how that end-to-end solution lays out, and especially from your end, Tia, how the biomanufacturing and manufacturing to these smaller gene therapy populations really gets executed?
I know we talk about, lowering the cost and having more precise medicine for smaller populations. But if you pay attention, gene therapy, cell therapy is super duper expensive. And so one of the benefits with this diversity effort, with this partnership between Indigenous and LucasPye BIO, is that the more information that you have, the more opportunity you have for that drug to be kind of, I don't want to say called genetic agnostic, but it'll definitely be more people agnostic, right? So now it's not so precise that only this 10,000 people will be able to benefit from that medicine. If you do it the right way and do iterations of that medication the right way, now we can bring down the cost of scale. Right now, it's a little bit more cheaper because actually being able to be applied to more patients with similar illnesses. So that's the biggest thing about it. And the other part of it about it is that when you, from a manufacturing standpoint, for Africa to be able to do this for themselves, or for, in this example, what we're working on, for Kenya to be able to manufacture these drugs themselves, this brings in another revenue line. This kind of actually, not kind of, this gives them the opportunity to totally control the market. Anything where Africa and their resources has been, what's the word I'm looking for? Exploited. Thank you. Anything where Africa has been exploited with the jewelry industry, with any other resource that they have. And so nobody's kind of, well, I'm not going to say they're not paying attention to it. They're starting to pay attention to it, especially since COVID. And so this is an opportunity for kind of Africa to take matters in their own hands and kind of control the narrative of what comes in and out and what is the next innovation in their particular healthcare system. And it will translate over here because now these drugs will be more inclusive so that African Americans or people of African descent can also benefit from these products.
Yeah, we actually had a question that speaks to that. If you maybe you touch on it before you go, Dr. Wilson, is you know, from a payment standpoint, someone asked, you know, how do people get paid for data? Is it like a token or a mobile app or what? You know, you can talk to this, you know, in addition.
Yeah, so are you talking about as far as the tokenization piece or our solution? Yeah, so, you know, what we're doing now is we've just been incorporated into Microsoft for Startup. So that's a news that we're going to celebrate because that's going to be important of building that infrastructure. And so Microsoft is there on the continent. So we've been strategically aligning ourselves with partners that's going to be able for us to carry out this innovation. And so, yeah, by having that mobile technology component, of course, you know, with anything else, we'll be able to aggregate that information every time the samples get accessed. We still haven't decided if it's going to be a wallet, but, you know, definitely considering cryptocurrency, you know, using the blockchain format that's already been out there, as Wilma mentioned. That's an innovation that's taken off on the continent. So about 80% of the innovation that's going on right now around blockchain is fintech. So that was another reason why we aligned ourselves to that. And so we'll consider the different ways on how to pay out patient, but the main thing is having them on the platform, which is that digital mobile platform, because once we have them there, they have a unique ID. And so the mechanism of payment could be a wallet or through cryptocurrency. So we'll explore that and go through the best scenario. And it could vary by countries, as Wilma mentioned. One could work for some countries and another method could work for other countries. So we'll have to go to each of those countries and figure out the best way how to do that payout.
Great. Did you want to comment on the previous question, though?
Sure. I was going to just quickly touch on that. With regards to you mentioning, you know, gene therapies for small populations, and that's true for rarer diseases. But what we're looking to address, in addition to those which exist, are you know, common chronic diseases, and as well that, as we mentioned earlier, are impacting populations all across the diaspora. So there is, you know, when you talk about gene therapies and, you know, which are, you know, in existence currently and are doing amazing things, like curing rare forms of genetic blindness. That's, you know, one, just cite just one specific example. But then you have things like sickle cell disease, you know, where, you know, that's the most classic example of a genetic disease known, right? It's a single genetic variant that's responsible, and how, you know, however, you know, and then there are companies that are, you know, working on solutions, gene therapy solutions for that currently, right now as well. So it's a mixed bag in terms of rare genetic diseases for small populations, but then also common chronic diseases in conditions for large swaths of the population.
Yeah, that's great. We had a couple of questions coming in here also. There you go.
Expanding Floormaps. Can you share your plan and vision for Philly surrounding communities? Absolutely. So right now, if you don't know, we are partnered with work with Jefferson Institute of Bioprocessing, another company, Stepping Stone Scholars, the Business Center, and the Wistar Institute. And we're working on a workforce development program right now to allow people, whether you have an educational background in life sciences, or more importantly for us, if you don't have an educational background in life sciences, you still get the opportunity to work in this industry. Personally, our commitment at LucasPye BIO with their workforce development program is that when they graduate and you start at an entry-level position with us, we're going to be paying a minimum of $50,000. So I know some people look at me crazy. Yes, it's built into the port forma. Yes, it is actually doable when you understand or really pay attention to how much money biotech companies make in this industry. It's very affordable. But with that track, even if you go through it without the background and you come work for me, there'll be other opportunities if you like to continue or expand your education and continue to go up that corporate ladder to go back to school. And companies like LucasPye BIO, and I'm sure others in the industry will be more than willing to pay for your education to go through that route.
Yeah, and just to echo, I think, as we talk about convergence, right, it's good to hear somebody that's the mirror image of myself sitting next to me, right? So I have twin daughters, and so they're a mirror image, and so, I think I found my twin as we speak the same language, and again, we haven't seen each other in over 16 years, so like yesterday. No, we're on the same path as well. We're able to tour the Jefferson Bioprocessing Center. Love what they're doing, having interns of diverse. I saw a lot of young women there, minority students intern, and so I want to expand that through. I'm prior military, so there's a lot of veterans that are coming out that came out of healthcare fields, lab techs, and those medic like myself. And so they struggle when we come out to figure out where to go. So a little short story there. When I came out, they told me IT was hot. So I went and started an IT program, and they told me to build a website, and I quit. So that's not my thing. So to point that out is, I want to extend Tia's vision, and again, I think what's happening here, you see the convergence. We're in Washington, D.C., another dense populace of minorities. And I'm going to be up in New York with the VFL. And COVID has kind of exposed some of these things. And I think there are going to be a lot of young minority, Latinx, African-American kids that want to do something. So another COVID doesn't happen. This is how innovation starts. And so, again, with supporting Tia on that, we're going to look at this Northeast tri-state area, Philly, New York, and Washington, D.C., that has a very dense population of African-American minorities, and start building these programs around life science for the inner city kids, and also for our veterans that are coming home that are looking for other areas to move into when they get out of military. Oh, HBC.
Right here. It's my turn, man. It's my turn, man. Dang, man. No, to answer the question, yes. The purpose of this partnership is to not only work with each other here in the U.S., but we will have, we can actually say a mirror of LucasPye BIO also in Africa and starting out in Kenya with IndyGeneUS AI. Absolutely.
Should we mention the Los Angeles connection as well?
Sure, yeah.
We kind of have to now.
No, it's just not official. There's a lot of things that aren't official yet. So we gotta. So
the next live event.
There you go. Hey, there you go. There you go. Next week, there you go. Come back. So yes, we understand the importance of training the next generation, diverse generation of scientists, and we have now an offer to come into the LA metropolitan area. Obviously, it's a very diverse area, and bring on interns. So we're really excited about that. And so we're grateful to LA Bioscience for that opportunity. They're really trying to kind of balance out the tech influence with Silicon Valley and say that there is a presence in LA. And so we're happy to be part of that.
That's great. So again, this is like a serendipity, I guess, but I'm hearing all this, and so BioBuzz is on a mission. We've actually hired people to move this forward, actually to introduce biotech to more diverse, larger populations. And we've actually started a number of different, we haven't told a lot of people about this, except for we are now. So I'm sitting here listening to you all, and I'm just like getting chills going, why haven't we met before this? But this is awesome. So again, that's the synergy that happens when you have these good conversations, and as a media partner, we want to be there to help introduce through events and through experiences with what you all are doing to get more people in your doors and to get more people in your doors. So
I have to ask, if it's okay with my colleagues, one of the next events we want to get African voices. Our scientists that we partner with, I think it's best to hear directly from them as well. So we'd love to have an event planned around sort of what we're doing in Africa.
Yeah.
Hearing from our wonderful board members and our female genomicists.
I love that.
Just wanted to add one little extra thing to the training piece. As three of us here on the panel are HBCU alum, we also want to emphasize that we're also looking to work with HBCUs in, of course, DC and here in Philadelphia, in the state of Pennsylvania, and in the region also as well, in terms of students who have interests in STEM and biotech fields, as well as and in other areas that we're branching out into, as Wilma mentioned, in terms of in LA as well.
Well, the message is out there now, so I hope your inboxes have a high capacity. So, on that note, we're coming up on our time here now, so I think this was a fantastic discussion, and I think, I learned a lot. I got excited just hearing from you. I'm sure our audience did as well. Thank you to everybody who participated online and brought all the questions. I'd love to give you an opportunity for some final thoughts and just, to close this conversation out and to, what are you most excited about in the future, and what do you want our audience to know about this partnership?
I just appreciate it for what it's bringing historically to life sciences. You got two companies that are the first African-American queer woman to own a biomanufacturing facility, first African-American in the U.S., I think the only African-American owned genomics company in the U.S. right now. And then what we're bringing to the forefront, not only in the diversity in us and diversity of the people that we're working with, but the diversity in the life sciences that's ultimately it's going to benefit everybody. So we're focused on, people African descent and people in Africa, but doing this helps everybody, as Dr. Wilmot mentioned earlier, from a humanity perspective. My final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think, what I would drive, I know, the past is what it is, right? And I think, what we love to focus here is the future of what precision medicine is going to look like. And as Dr. Allen mentioned, I just don't see how that's moves forward without inclusion and diversity. And so, take the time to, look into this field of next-gen sequencing and genomics, because, this is where the future of medicine is going. To the young kids out there that want to be scientists, this is an area and field that's very lucrative. And, I want to see a lot more science majors. And so, here in the inner cities. But I think overall, it's just having good medicine and good science and being equitable across. I think that's what Indigenous and LucasPye BIO is showing you here, is that you get to win when there's diverse teams. And I think it's time for us to have more inclusion, have more minorities in the field, but also in these trials, and women across the board, in order to come up with, the next future of medicine.
I think for closing thoughts for me, just what's really exciting is to me is the potential for the powerful research that we can conduct, and the excellent training opportunities that we'll be able to generate, and then also ultimately the impact on health, right, of populations across the diaspora and ultimately across the globe. Because as Tia mentioned, the work that we're doing will not only just impact populations of African descent, it will ultimately impact the entire human population.
Thank you. So ultimately, we're in the business of saving lives and enabling human life to flourish. And so I would say that the future is bright, but we want to make that future now. It has to be now. There's a sense of urgency that we all need to undertake around this, not just in America. God bless America. I firsthand came back and wanted to hug the person who administered my shot because I could just walk into a CVS. But that's not the case for everyone. And so we need to understand that we live in a different world. And so we invite our investor partners, other strategic partners to really come on board to engage us, because this is really, really important work. And the future has to become right now.
Fantastic. Well, from a city that's built on firsts, I think you all heard today many more firsts to come that are going to happen quickly with a sense of urgency and make a huge impact. So thank you all for this insightful discussion. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. On behalf of BioBuzz, we want to thank you for the opportunity to host this great discussion. And we look forward to continue it, hopefully many more times.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Take care.